Greetings, nerds, blerds, trekkies, and trekkers. Welcome back to Cena Nerd Presents Blerd Trek. I'm Will Polk, and today we're diving into one of the most powerful and relevant episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Far Beyond the Stars. This 13th episode of Deep Space Nine's 6th season first aired on February 9, 1998, and was directed by Captain Sisko actor himself, Avery Brooks, and was written by Ira Stephen Bear and Hans Beimler from a story by Mark Scott Zicree. This episode is a masterpiece, a gut punch of truth wrapped in science fiction, exposing the harsh realities of racism, sexism, and classism, issues we're still dealing with today in 2025. With Black History Month in full swing and legitimate diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and initiatives being cut and dismantled across the United States as the current administration uses the acronym DEI as a dog whistle, it is the perfect time to revisit what Far Beyond the Stars teaches us about our past, our present, and our future. Let's get into it. Spoilers are ahead. In Far Beyond the Stars, Captain Sisko finds himself experiencing vivid visions of another life. One where he's Benny Russell, a black science fiction writer in 1950s America. Benny's a part of a team of writers creating pulp science fiction stories, but his latest idea, a futuristic tale about a black space station commander, meets immediate resistance from his white editor. His co-workers support him to varying degrees, but at the end of the day, the decision makers refuse to publish his story. And why is that? Because the idea of a black man in command of a space station is considered to be too unrealistic. Benny's struggle doesn't stop at his workplace. Throughout the episode, we see systemic racism suffocating him, whether it's being dismissed by his superiors, ridiculed by society, even some of the black characters that he interacts with, questioning why he's doing this writing thing, when all the people only in the world only see him as another N-word. Hard R. And I think that's the only time that we've actually had that racial slur uttered in Star Trek. But in the most brutal moment, Benny's beaten down moments after witnessing the murder of his friend Jimmy by the police. On his first day back to the office, weeks later, Benny's stunned to learn that the owner has pulped that month's issue rather than publish his story about a black hero commanding the space station. Also, in a further indignity, Benny is fired. The episode ends with Benny's breakdown, his cries of, "You can't erase me." As he is taken away in an ambulance, the street preacher who had appeared throughout the episode appears in the ambulance with him and tells Benny that he is both a dreamer and a dream. Sisko wakes up back on the station, and then he wonders, as he's deeply moved by those visions, and he wonders as he looks out into space, is Benny Russell really out there? And is he dreaming of them and writing more stories about Deep Space Nine? As we end the episode, the question is, can we still hear Benny's cry today of our people trying to erase us? This episode hits deep because it lays bare the struggles that marginalized voices have faced and still face when it's trying to tell their stories or just trying to do their job and make a living. Let's break it down. First, it deals with racism in the workplace and society. Benny's experience mirrors the real-life struggles of black creatives and professionals throughout history. From the early science fiction pioneers like Samuel R. Delany to modern-day black professionals, getting recognized and respected is an uphill battle. The idea that a black protagonist in a science fiction story was too much reflects how much mainstream media has limited representation historically. Today we've seen improvements, of course, with series like Star Trek Discovery having a black lead. We've had big movies like Black Panther and other things like that. But the fight for representation is still ongoing. And let's be real, this isn't just about science fiction. Black professionals in every field today are met with the same resistance, whether it's in corporate America, tech, entertainment, and we've seen the attacks on merit-based programs and people's hard work to earn what they have achieved being attacked, being a DEI hire or too woke or any one of those pejorative terms that's been thrown out there, and really is a code word for what they are really saying here, which is We didn't earn it, and we aren't qualified, and it's just a code word for black. That's the truth. This episode really puts a mirror and a spotlight not only in the 1950s America, but also in 2025. It also touches on sexism in the workplace. While Far Beyond the Stars does focus its attention on racism, it also shows how women, especially white women and especially black women, have faced their own barriers. I mean, just look at the most recent presidential election. And also, it shows in the episode how a white woman in the 1950s had to deal with it. But also, imagine if Benny was a black woman. Do you think she would even have been in that office with those other writers? But also, looking at Kay, the character played by Nana Visitor, who was Kira's representation in Benny's dream, it rings true how in that episode both Benny and Kay were told to take a sick day whenever it was time for the photo for the magazine that they were writing for. This also rings true, quite frankly, what Star Trek had to deal with in the real world back in the 1960s, when you had a white female writer, Dorothy Catherine Fontana, aka DC Fontana, who wrote legendary Star Trek episodes, but she couldn't use her full name because probably at the time, people would not have taken those stories from her as seriously if she had used her given name, Dorothy Catherine, instead of her initials, DC. So she wrote some of the most famous stories of Star Trek, including the Enterprise incident and Journey to Babel, among the 10 episodes that she had her screenwriter credit to. So whether it was in front of the camera or behind the camera, we also think about the discourse of Star Trek Discovery not being real Star Trek or being too woke because they had a black female lead. Those things still resonate today. Also, when you think about classism and police brutality, the police brutality in the episode is one of the most chilling parts. Seeing Benny beaten down whenever he was just trying to find out what happened to his friend Jimmy mirrors many of the countless real-world instances of racialized police violence that we've seen. Fast forward to 2020, George Floyd's murder forced a national reckoning on policing. And then we had protests, policy changes, and promises that followed. But in 2025, how much of that has really changed? We are seeing the rollback of some of those initiatives and measures to address issues in policing. So we have to ask, what does Far Beyond the Stars say about where we are in 2025? Let's talk about some recent developments. 1. The performative versus the genuine. After George Floyd, we saw Juneteenth become a federal holiday and companies embracing more diversity, equity, and initiative programs. But were these actions meaningful, or were they just corporate PR moves? While some progress was real, such as increased black leadership in media and policy shifts in policing, of course we saw the election of a black man, Barack Obama, as president, much of it was, so we did have some tangible things, but in many cases it was just surface level. We've seen now the backlash and the rollbacks with Donald Trump being elected to office. Many of these DEI initiatives in both government and in the private sector are being dismantled and rolled back. We're seeing major rollbacks in those corporate and diversity and government diversity efforts to make sure that we have an inclusive and a representative workplace of all faces in America. The recent Supreme Court rulings for Harvard and USC admissions have put programs such as for affirmative action under attack, affecting the college opportunities for many marginalized students. The fight continues. Far Beyond the Stars teaches us that progress is fragile. Benny thought he was finally getting his story published, only to be shut down. That same pattern plays out today when hard-fought gains are reversed. But like Benny, we can't let the system erase us. We have to keep fighting. So, as we celebrate Black History Month, what can we take from Far Beyond the Stars? First, it is the power of telling our own stories. Representation does matter. We need to support Black and other people of color creatives, whether they're writing books, making films, leading in tech and politics, academics, or other professions. Recognizing performative activism. We got to make sure that real change isn't just about hashtags and corporate statements. It's about policy shifts and sustained action. And most importantly, we have to stay vigilant. Just because we've made progress doesn't mean the fight is over, because if history tells us anything, it can be reversed if we're not paying attention, and that is what's happening now. Far Beyond the Stars isn't just an episode about Star Trek. It's a lesson. It's a reminder of why we fight, why we push for representation, and why we can't let history repeat itself. If this video resonated with you, I would love for you to hit that like button, subscribe for more nerdy explorations here on our channel, for Blerd Trek and our main show, and drop a comment below. And last, what did Far Beyond the Stars teach you? And how can we turn all of these things that we talked about for beyond just performative action activism into real lasting change? Thanks for joining me through this journey through space, time, and Star Trek, for an exploration of justice for us, not only in the Star Trek universe, but also in the US. I'm Will Polk, and until next time, keep challenging the status quo, both on screen and in real life, and live long and prosper.